History is an infinite and endless mosaic of human lives and destinies. Some are happy, some are tragic, while others remain veiled in mystery. The last smile, the last wave, the still warm bed, the thunder of the ocean waves. These are often our last memories of those who disappeared without a trace. In this episode, we'll be presenting 10 stories that end not with a full stop, but with a question mark. Homicide? Kidnap? Escape? Or were far more mysterious forces at work? The loss of a loved one is always enormously painful. And even more painful if their relatives don't have a clear answer as to what happened. Mysterious and unsolved disappearances. 10. There are no miracles.
Bosnian newspapers stories about a possible sighting of high religious
One of the most
significance.
mysterious disappearances in modern history. This is how the world media has described the disappearance of a little girl named Madeleine McCann, just days before her 4th birthday. In May 2007, Kate and Jerry McCann, a British couple, took their small daughter Madeleine and her 2 siblings on holiday to Praia da Luz, a resort in the Algarve in southern Portugal. Thursday, May the 5th. Kate and Jerry put their children to bed, then go out for dinner with friends at the Ocean Club restaurant, just a few hundred meters from their apartment. They keep checking on the children every half hour. At around 10 in the evening, Kate goes back to the apartment to check on the children, but discovers to her horror that Madeleine is missing. Her brother and sister are still asleep, and the window is wide open. The parents contact the police and resort staff at once. A massive police search is launched on a scale never before seen in Portugal. It involves hundreds of helpers, police dogs, airport closures, and endless questioning of witnesses. The investigation becomes one of the most challenging in the history of the country. The police receive multiple leads as to the possible fate of the child. An unknown man of light skin seen in the vicinity of the apartment carrying a child. The girl's DNA found on an impounded vehicle. Or reports of sightings in Morocco and Malta. But the mystery of her disappearance is never solved. In September 2007, even Madeleine's parents are accused of foul play, but they are soon cleared of suspicion. A sizable reward for any information leading to Madeleine's recovery produces nothing. In June 2008, the case is shelved due to lack of evidence. The mystery remains unsolved.
The evidence that's been presented by the PJ and the prosecutor to the judiciary, and the judiciary, having reviewed all of the evidence, have said that there is no evidence that Madeleine is dead.
Was the girl murdered, or was she kidnapped and taken to another country, where she may still be to this day? Nine. Mission with no return. Elegant seducer, accomplished diver, or James Bond prototype. All these images are conjured up by the name Lionel Crabb, a famous British agent who mysteriously disappeared during a mission. What do we know about this strange story? Crabb was given his final assignment in April 1956. In a small boat, he approached the Soviet cruiser Ordzhonikidze, which was visiting Britain on a goodwill mission and anchored in Portsmouth Harbour. Crabb's mission was to photograph the cruiser's hull underwater and gain as much information as possible about the ship. But Crabb does not return from his mission. Alarm bells ring in London. On the 29th of April, the Secret Intelligence Services, MI5 and MI6, release a joint statement explaining Crabb's disappearance as death by drowning. However, many experts point out that this is highly unlikely. Were the Secret Services trying to divert attention from the real investigation? There are many hypotheses about what really happened to Agent Crabbe. For a long time, the most plausible of these was that Crabbe was captured by the Russians and taken to the Soviet Union, where he was tortured in order to obtain British intelligence secrets. Subsequently, he's believed to have been taken to Lefortovo prison, where he wore prisoner number 147. It's also thought that during his stay at Lefortovo prison, he was brainwashed. However, convincing evidence of any such allegations has yet to be produced. Other theories paint an even blacker picture. Some researchers believe Crabbe was caught and executed immediately on the ship. Others say his mutilated body was found the following year, a claim strenuously denied by MI5. In 2007, historians interested in Crabbe's fate were surprised by a statement from an elderly Russian ex-diver. Eduard Koltsov claimed it was he who killed the famous agent after being sent to check out suspicious activity around the Soviet cruiser. So does that solve the mystery? Or was it simply a publicity stunt to boost the sales of a new book about the charismatic agent? 8. Lost Little Ben. The story of Ben Needham differs from most other cases of missing children in that certain grim discoveries made long after the event suggest that the mystery may finally be solved. Ben Needham, a little boy from Sheffield, not yet 2 years old, disappeared on July the 24th, 1991, on the Greek island of Kos. After a long and fruitless search, the investigating team decided the most likely version was that the boy had been kidnapped. The British Prime Minister at the time, John Major, urged the Greek authorities to intensify their efforts. A photograph of Ben and description of his clothes was put out, after which around 300 alleged sightings were reported. None, however, led to the child being found. In October 2012, the South Yorkshire Police received a clue indicating a completely different version of the events that led to the boy's disappearance. This alternative theory, based on a number of interrogations in the area where the boy was last seen, was that the boy could have been either accidentally or deliberately killed. Investigators identified a rubble tip near the farmhouse where the Needham family had been staying, and the authorities agreed to another police search.
But we are here to support the Greek authorities in any way that we can, and we're trying to help them as best we can, and also to support the Needham family. They have a missing toddler who went missing. I know it's 21 years ago, but what wouldn't a parent go through to find her child?
However, no human remains or objects linked to Ben were found. Just 4 years later, police resumed their excavation of the site and found an object specifically related to Ben, a piece of his yellow dinky toy car. Then another, part of a baby's sandal. On both items, the forensics team found traces of blood. Suddenly, the most likely explanation of Ben's disappearance was murder. Forensic specialists have yet to confirm that it is in fact Ben Needham's DNA in the blood. Either way, dead or alive, we are still no closer to knowing where the little boy ended up. Seven, The Last Vacation. The Cameron Highlands, a beautiful region of Southeast Asia where lush mountain jungle alternates with huge tea plantations. And the scene, in 1967, of the mysterious disappearance of Jim Thompson, the King of Silk. Thompson's story starts during the Second World War, when, as an American soldier, he arrives in Thailand and quickly becomes fascinated by that country's most famous commodity. After the end of the war, he works with the CIA to set up a silk production company and export the precious fabric all over the world. In time, he becomes a millionaire and a living legend, dressing movie stars and other celebrities, as well as members of the Thai royal family. But his days of success and glory are numbered. In March 1967, Thompson takes a trip to neighbouring Malaysia, to the exclusive resort of Cameron Highlands. On Sunday, March the 26th, he and his wife and 2 other friends attend Mass in the local church, after which they return to their bungalow, romantically named Moonlight. After lunch, he tells the others that he's going for a walk, the last words he is known to have uttered. Then he disappears without a trace. On the same day, a major search is launched, involving more than 500 people. The police and army are joined by volunteers, some lured by the promise of a generous reward. They comb the whole resort and the surrounding jungle, but in vain. Thompson is never seen or heard of again. Even the finding of some bone fragments in 1985 fails to shed any light on the mystery.
In this case, I think it was, he was killed, and he was killed purposely.
Some people, however, think the key may be a strange encounter he had that same morning with the driver of a white car before he left for church. Could he have fallen foul of his old partners in the CIA? Or did his business competitors decide they wanted him out of the way? We will probably never know. 6. A Tibetan mystery. Some disappearances are mysteries, pure and simple, and remain so forever. Others may involve crime and malicious intent. And some cases are indeed solved, but can we be sure the official answer is necessarily the right one? This story begins in 1989, when the Panchen Lama, the second highest spiritual authority in Tibetan Buddhism after the Dalai Lama, dies in a strange and unexpected way. The Tibetan government in exile immediately launches a search for the 11th incarnation of the Lama, a search that lasts until 1995, when a 6-year-old named Gedun Chokye Nyima from the then little-known town of Dharamsala at the foot of the Himalayas is named the new Panchen Lama. This does not go unnoticed by the Chinese authorities. In May 1995, the new Panchen Lama is also recognized by the Dalai Lama. Then, a few years later, the boy and his family disappear without a trace. According to unofficial sources, the Chinese flew him and his family to an unknown location. This was followed by a series of raids on Tibetan monasteries lasting a whole year. When the situation had calmed down, the Chinese authorities picked their own Panchen Lama, a boy named Gyönkén Norbu. But even today, 20 years after Gedun's disappearance, Gyönkén is still not acknowledged by Tibetan Buddhists. Some activists have pointed out that Gedun is probably the youngest political prisoner in the world, a prisoner no one will ever see again. In fact, no one even knows if he and his family are still alive. Despite initially refuting any suggestion of kidnapping, the Chinese authorities are now more open about their involvement in the Lama's disappearance. When asked about his whereabouts, they issue assurances that the boy is being well looked after, living a normal life and getting a proper education. Can we believe them? The fact remains that the boy's situation remains a mystery. Will the real Panchen Lama ever be seen in public again? Five. Irvin's last climb. The Himalayas. At 8,000 meters above sea level, this inhospitable landscape is dominated by the legendary Mount Everest. Officially, Everest was first conquered by Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay in 1953. However, it's quite possible that 30 years earlier, British mountaineers Andrew Irvin and George Mallory managed to reach the summit after an extremely dangerous and sadly fatal attempt. In May 1924, their 12-man team, aided by around 150 Tibetan Sherpas, sets out to climb the mighty peak. However, the expedition struggles from the very start, perhaps because of unreliable oxygen equipment. Due to the worsening weather conditions, only 2 men, Mallory and a young student, Irvin, who the others called Sandy, set off for the summit. On the 8th of June, shortly after noon, both climbers were spotted high up on the mountain, making their way down. And that was the last time they were ever seen. Had they made it to the top? And what happened to them in the end? For nearly 100 years, these questions have intrigued mountaineers and armchair adventurers alike. In 1999, an expedition took to the Himalayas in an attempt to find the answers. After an arduous search, the remains of George Mallory were discovered at an altitude of 8,155 meters. But the events leading to the mountaineer's disappearance remained a mystery. Irvin's body is still out there somewhere in the frozen wilderness, and with him, the camera the pair took with them, which could provide crucial evidence as to what really happened in those last fateful hours.
It is our intention to go back and continue the search for Andrew Irvine and the camera, and we think we can find it. We think we know where it is, and we're going to give it our best shot.
There is still much speculation as to what became of them. One theory is that as they returned to base camp, they fell from an ice face. Some also speculate that while Irvin fell into an abyss, Mallory survived the fall, but later perished on his way back to camp. Is this really what happened? Or did a completely different sequence of events lead to the mountaineer's disappearance? Until Irvin's body is finally found, the mystery remains. Four, the Rockefeller case. There are not many families that have managed to sustain media and public interest for so long. The Rockefeller clan, one of the richest families in the world, has had many successes, but more than its share of tragedy as well. One day in 1961, Nelson Rockefeller, the governor of New York City, unexpectedly summons the press. It's obvious something serious has happened. The grief-stricken governor announces that his son Michael has disappeared during an expedition to the wilderness of New Guinea. The public is in shock, though most people expect the young man will show up soon enough. But he doesn't. The days become weeks, months, years. To this day, the disappearance of the billionaire's son remains one of the great mysteries of modern times. The Dutch anthropologist René Wassing, who accompanied Michael on the expedition, was able to supply some information. According to him, it all started when their ship sank suddenly off the coast of New Guinea, in an area inhabited by the Asmat tribe. 2 local guides swam to the shore for help, but Michael refused to wait and set off on his own. This is the last time Wassing, who was later rescued, never saw his friend again. Did Michael misjudge the situation and drown in the sea? For a lot of people today, this seems unlikely. Michael was a good swimmer, and his body was never found. A theory has emerged that young Rockefeller managed to reach the shore, but was captured by the Asmats, who killed him and ate his flesh according to their tribal custom. This is borne out by interviews with descendants of some of the natives, and by a Dutch missionary who reported the cannibalism to his superior. However, certain facts make this extremely unlikely. For one thing, Michael had previously visited many Asmat villages without any problems. So why would he be captured just when he obviously needed help? The most likely explanation is almost equally macabre: that the young man was attacked and devoured by an animal, probably a shark or crocodile. 3. Amelia's last flight. She is a great example for strong, self-confident women the world over. In 1932, American pilot Amelia Earhart achieved fame as the first woman to fly over the Atlantic. But just 5 years later, she disappeared in strange circumstances. 1937, a time of dark foreboding as the clouds of war slowly gather over Europe and the world prepares for the worst. So when Amelia Earhart sets out on her next flight, together with her navigator Fred Noonan, the American public holds its breath and hopes all goes well. The intrepid duo set out from Papua New Guinea on the final stage of their journey on the 2nd of July. Suddenly, over the Pacific Ocean near Howland Island, their two-engined Lockheed Electra ceases to communicate. The famous pilot and her navigator will never be seen again. To this day, all sorts of theories exist about what happened that fateful day. Some believe the pair lost their way due to a navigation failure and crashed in the ocean. And of course, conspiracy theorists have come up with their own hypothesis too. According to some, Earhart was in fact an American spy, entrusted with the task of exploring the Marshall Islands, where the Japanese had a military base. During the mission, Earhart was captured and most likely executed. For others, she survived the Japanese prison and found her way back to the United States, where she later changed her name. In recent times, many old photographs taken in the Marshall Islands have come to light, in which a group of people can be seen in the company of a woman who resembles the missing pilot. Unfortunately, the identity of this person has never been verified, so the mystery remains unsolved. We may never know what really happened to Amelia Earhart, one of the bravest women of the 20th century. 2. The Prime Minister who disappeared. December 1967. The Australian Liberal Party has been in power for a year, headed by its charismatic leader Harold Holt, an experienced politician who has known nothing but success, although his opposition to the Vietnam War has made him the target of some criticism. Holt is known not only for his political opinions, but also for his healthy lifestyle. He often appears in the media wearing a neoprene wetsuit, diving being his favourite sport, a sport that will most likely prove fatal for him. In 1967, Holt spent a mid-December weekend in his house in Portsea on the coast of Victoria. His favourite spot in the area is Cheviot Beach, and there he plans to meet his friend Alan Stewart. It's Sunday morning and the waves are strong that day, but both men are experienced swimmers and nothing would suggest that tragedy is imminent. Suddenly, Stewart loses sight of his friend. In vain, he waits for him to re-emerge from the surf, but Holt is nowhere to be seen. A search and rescue operation begins immediately and lasts for about 3 weeks. Divers, boats and helicopters are involved in the search, but the body of the missing Prime Minister is never found. It's still unclear what exactly happened. Could Holt have overestimated his strength, or did he get a heart attack whilst underwater? There's been much speculation about the fate of the politician. Some think Holt committed suicide, an idea rejected outright by all those who knew him. A strong man like Holt, they say, would never have committed such an act. Over the years, public attention has turned to other possible explanations, some of them quite far-fetched. Holt may have been poisoned by a slow-acting poison, or, according to one 1980s conspiracy theory, kidnapped and taken to China in a small submarine where he worked as a spy for the Chinese government. While serious historians have since debunked this claim, the truth about Holt's disappearance remains a mystery. 1. Inconvenient Jimmy. Michigan, 1975. Jimmy Hoffa, the feared leader of the Teamsters labor union, spends his last days in his luxury villa on Lake Orion. After a mysterious telephone call, he suddenly leaves for lunch at a restaurant in a Detroit suburb called the Red Fox, a lunch from which he will never return. No one will ever see him again. What happened remains unexplained, as Hoffa's body has never been found. No one demanded a ransom, and the various speculations about his death will never be proven. Did his controversial past catch up with him, and he became the victim of murder? Some people think he probably got what he deserved. But what if the real story was very different? Hoffa was a union man and politician with a considerable and colourful reputation. He had a criminal record and extensive links with the mafia. That's why, when America heard about his disappearance, nobody was really surprised. The most popular theory is that Hoffa was trapped in a mafia apartment where he was murdered by 3 men, and that his body was later thrown to the alligators in a Florida swamp or crushed in a scrapyard. But others believe Hoffa returned in disguise to his native Brazil as a result of constant death threats, or that he actually managed to be included in the FBI Witness Protection Program. The truth is that shortly after his disappearance, there was a series of arrests among US mobsters. Could the police have acquired information about the criminal underworld from Hoffa? In 2012, a new theory emerged when the police in Washington received an anonymous tip that Hoffa's body was buried under a shed of a house in a Detroit suburb. But an extensive search revealed nothing.
This body was interred the day of and the day after Mr. Hoffa disappeared. So the timelines don't really add up with that way.
What really happened to Jimmy Hoffa? The answer remains a mystery to this day.